Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
After obtaining the modified anatomic impression of the edentulous ridge, it is necessary to make a cast of that supporting ridge to which the removable partial denture can be processed. This will provide the best possible support for the base. If an extension-based removable partial denture is to be opposed by a complete denture, the remaining anterior teeth of the mandibular master cast must be preserved and used in conjunction with the new registration of the denture-bearing area. The teeth for the maxillary denture should be set in their correct overbite and overjet relationship to those mandibular anterior teeth. A method has been devised to preserve the anterior teeth of the mandibular master cast from which the prosthesis framework was fabricated, and to add or substitute the new ridge or denture-bearing area obtained with a correctable material for the ridge which was registered in the original alginate impression. This method is known as correcting the master cast or altering the master cast. In this procedure, the denture-bearing area of the master cast is removed from the master cast. The partial denture framework carrying the corrected ridge impression is seated on the remains of the master cast and luted into place with sticky wax. The new ridge or denture-bearing area is then added to the master cast. This procedure is recommended when constructing an extension-based removable partial denture against a maxillary denture. It may be used when the extension-based removable partial denture opposes natural teeth or another removable partial denture. It is not indicated for use on tooth-borne prostheses since the edentulous ridge does not normally provide support for these cases. All clay, blockout wax, base plate wax, and relief wax should be removed from the master cast, except for the blockout wax next to the primary abutment tooth. This wax should be removed very carefully to avoid damage to the master cast. The base of the master cast should be approximately 1/4 of an inch thick. If it is much thicker than that, it should be thinned on the model trimmer. A new base will be added to the master cast when we add the new ridge. By ensuring that the base is thin enough, it will prevent making the new base of the altered master cast too thick. Inasmuch as the original anatomic ridge form is removed by sawing, a thin base makes the sawing process much easier. To make the sawing easier, we should draw a line on this master cast at right angles to the edentulous ridge, just distal to the primary abutment tooth, about where the blockout wax ends. This line should extend on the buccal down to the base of the cast and on a lingual beyond the lingual sulcus. A second line should be drawn perpendicular to this first line, posteriorly to the extent of the master cast, and then again down to the base of the master cast. If we turn the master cast over and we extend these two lines along the base and join them, now these lines will give us an exact guide to use when we saw or remove the edentulous ridge form from the master cast. Being very careful and using a spiral saw, start to saw on this line that you have drawn. You should be very careful and brace the master cast during the sawing procedure so that you do not break the master cast. An alternate method of removing the master cast or the edentulous ridge from the master cast is to use a wheel, a fast cut wheel on a lathe, and remove the edentulous ridge on that lathe. You should be very careful when you're using the fast cut wheel, because the vibration of the wheel may cause you to break that master cast. It is safer to use a saw. When you have sawed through, you discard the anatomic ridge form and examine the remains of your master cast carefully. You should not have disturbed, marred, or damaged the abutment tooth area. You may have to use a knife to sharpen up some of the areas where you have cut with a saw. Place your framework and your edentulous ridge impression on the remains of your master cast, and it should not have to be forced into position. And examine the area next to the abutment tooth very, very carefully. None of the impression paste should be hitting any part of the master cast. If everything is all right at this stage, we will prepare mechanical locks in the base of this master cast so that the new stone that we will be adding will have better adhesion. Using a large round acrylic burr in a handpiece, start to drill holes in the base of this master cast. Be very, very careful as you're drilling these holes. They should be deep enough and large enough so that when you add the new stone to this master cast, some of the new stone will be forced into these holes and will provide a mechanical lock between the two mixes of stone. After the holes have been drilled in the base of the master cast, the prosthesis is placed on the remains of the master cast so that all occlusal rests are firmly seated in their final resting position. This prosthesis is held in place and then sticky waxed in place with enough sticky wax so that the prosthesis and impression will not move during the boxing and pouring up procedure. Once the prosthesis has been sticky waxed in place, using some rope utility wax, start to bead around your prosthesis impression. This rope utility wax should be added around the impression on either the compound or base part of the impression so that you provide a peripheral roll for this prosthesis base. We usually add a little extra rope utility wax along the distal flange or periphery of this base area to provide some added support for the stone so that we will have an adequate amount of stone in this area so that the bases that we will make in the future, either the temporary bases or the finished prosthesis bases, will not fracture off that area. Once we have adapted this wax, rope utility wax around, we start to seal it to the impression. We do this carefully. So there will be no seepage of stone through when we are pouring up our new base. Once this wax has been completely sealed, we'll add additional wax in the lingual area to fill up that area. After you have completed the boxing of the impression itself, add a rope of utility wax around the remains of the master cast to provide a good sealing medium for the actual boxing wax. This wax should also be sealed to the master cast. Examine the cast carefully after you have added the rope utility wax, particularly next to the abutment tooth. All holes must be eliminated to prevent stone from seeping through onto the master cast itself. It is advisable to flow some utility wax in the area between the abutment tooth and the framework and the impression to eliminate potential areas of seepage. You should examine this wax cast against a strong light for these potential areas. After we've eliminated all of these areas, we will proceed to box the master cast. Usually, we have to take 2 pieces of boxing wax sealed together along the long axis of the boxing wax to make it wide enough to completely enclose both the base and the impression. Adapt this wax completely around your master cast, and then proceed to seal that wax to the boxing wax or the rope wax. When this has been sealed completely, and this may take a little time, examine it again against a strong light to be sure that you have filled in all of the holes and there'll be no seepage. The boxed master cast has been soaked in water for about 5 to 10 minutes to thoroughly soak that cast and allow better adhesion of the old stone to the new stone. Blow off any excess water, particularly in the impression area. All we want is stone there, not water. Slowly start to add 150-gram mix of the same type of stone used for the master cast, and in this case, Velmix, to your impression. Be very careful as you pour, and in the area adjacent to the primary abutment tooth, you may have to manually, with a number 7 spatula, force some of the stone down next to that abutment tooth. Otherwise, you will have a poor joint. This is an example of a poor joint next to an abutment tooth because of poor soaking of the cast. And in this instance, you would have to actually add more stone in that area before you could make a base for the partial denture, or else redo the impression and corrected master cast. You continue to add stone in small increments, vibrating it until you fill the impression itself. You can take larger increments on a spatula, and as you fill, slowly force some of the stone into the prepared undercuts that you have made. Continue to add this stone until you fill the entire boxed impression. After the stone has set completely, remove the boxing wax and rope utility wax to expose your new altered cast. It is best to trim the cast on a model trimmer to create the sides and base of the new cast before separation. While trimming, also place a 45-degree bevel completely around the base of the cast and grooves to provide an index for later remounting procedures. We have removed the sticky wax by chilling it and flaking it off. We have placed the cast in some hot water for about 5 minutes to soften any compound used during the impression making procedure, and we gently try to remove the appliance and the temporary base from this corrected master cast. If we experience any difficulty in removing the prosthesis, we should check the areas where the impression is made for any stone which may be locking it in place. Scrape any of that stone away. If we still experience difficulty, you may have to use an alcohol torch and soften the resin base, but do not burn it. You just heat it until it's soft. Continue to pry on this carefully until you remove the prosthesis. And you have your altered master cast. Usually you will have some remnants of impression plaster or impression paste left in here. These can be removed by gently scraping. Be very careful you do not distort or scratch your impression. If you have any remnants left that are very, very tricky, it may be best to use a little chloroform, which will dissolve the impression paste. Again, with a sharp scraper or scalpel, remove all the sharp edges around your impression. If this stone is not removed, it may fracture during the processing procedure and become embedded in the final acrylic resin base. Do not eliminate the peripheral roll that you established with your impression. We have created a corrected or altered master cast which incorporates in one cast the anatomic form of the remaining natural or restored teeth upon which the metal framework was fabricated, and the supporting form of the edentulous ridge in relation to that framework. This cast incorporates a coordination of loading between the abutment teeth and the residual ridge so that the finished prosthesis fabricated on this cast will achieve support from both the abutment teeth and the residual ridge in an optimal relationship.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.